It's wonderful to have the opportunity to present my research. I'm looking forward to your questions. So you might have noticed that I posed the question, law or technology, and I did that to try to provoke you into arguing with me, because I don't actually believe that it is an either or question, but in many instances it's posed as an either or question. So what I thought I'd do today is start off by talking a bit about the international law that's relevant to COVID-19, because I'm an international lawyer, and then talk about how it relates to technology. So you've probably seen a lot in the media about the World Health Organization, which is the international organization that aims to coordinate global health law. It's not a first responder organization, although it's sometimes criticized for not doing enough on the ground, but that's not its role. And of course, COVID-19 is relevant to lots of other areas of international law. For example, it could be a threat to international peace and security. It's the biggest pandemic that we've experienced since 1918. So you might expect the Security Council to get involved in the way that it did in relation to the 2014 Ebola outbreak in West Africa. COVID-19 raises a lot of human rights issues. On the one hand, there are obligations on states to protect people's right to health and to allow them freedom of movement and to acknowledge their right to privacy. And on the other hand, the states are potentially infringing people's human rights by lockdown and other restrictive sorts of measures. COVID-19 has raised big issues in trade law. So the trade of goods might be stopped, migration flows, tourism, the movement of people across borders, the return of nationals to their home countries. They're all relevant to international law. But let's talk a bit more in detail about the WHO and whether it is effective or relevant to stopping the spread of COVID-19. So the WHO is actually the successor to an earlier organisation, the Health Organisation set up by the League of Nations. And it's created by states in the way that people might set up a company to do things that are better done by an international organisation than are done by individual states. It was hoped that health is something that everyone can agree is important, and in some ways it was hoped that this should be above politics. But in fact, as we have seen with every time the WHO has declared a public health emergency of international concern, which it's done 6 times since 2005, politics is something that can't be left behind. So the World Health Organization operates under its constitution, and it also has the international health regulations, which were set up in 2005 following SARS-CoV-1. So the previous regulations were seen as not effective, and they were revised after SARS-CoV-1. And the main issue that's relevant here is that the Director General of the WHO, acting on the advice of an expert emergency committee, has the power to declare a public health emergency of international concern. And from this flow the ability to recommend temporary measures. So they might be to close borders, to limit contact, and so on. But the FEIC, the Public Health Emergency of International Concern, has been criticised as a very crude tool. It's a binary tool. It's either on or it's off. And what we've noticed is that perhaps there needs to be a more gradual tool. So not just a red light or a green light, but we need an amber light as a warning to say that there are concerning developments and we need to keep a close eye on them. The other thing which has been noticed in relation to COVID-19 is that the international health regulations don't say very much about the response to a pandemic. So once a public health emergency of international concern has been declared, there's not very much structure or tools that are available for the WHO. The other thing which you've no doubt noticed in the media over the last few months is President Donald Trump's plan to withdraw from the WHO. And the US provides over double the next closest figure, which comes from China, in terms of funding for the WHO. So the US's withdrawal is going to have a major impact on the WHO and its operations. So all of these issues, problems with the international health regulations, the politicization of global health law, and the ability of member states like the US to just walk away from an international organization and leave it without funding are some of the reasons why international law is criticized as being ineffective in stopping the spread of COVID-19. So let's talk now about technology and how it might be relevant. I see technology as a very open word, and usually we tend to think of digital technologies. For example, the drones that have been trialed for use in spotting people's temperatures and alerting them if they should be tested for COVID-19. We've all probably been to a telehealth appointment since COVID-19 started, used to try and prevent the spread from health workers to patients and vice versa. And we're all aware of the COVID Safe Tracing app, which the Australian government rolled out earlier this year, the cost of which has now gone up to $4.8 million. But there's only been one case which is acknowledged as having been caught by the tracing app that would not have been caught by manual tracing, so far as I'm aware. And these tracing apps, contact tracing apps, are around the world. There are over 20 of them worldwide, and they work slightly differently. But masks, personal protective equipment, and also law are other examples of technologies. So I'm saying here that technology is something that is not natural, that humans have invented to help them as a tool to fulfill a particular purpose. And in this relationship, I'd like to also look at technology as being dependent on law. So if we think about coding, coding is a type of law, it's dependent on rules. If we think about the tracing apps, some countries have made them mandatory, particularly for their military, their police, or their public servants. And that is a way to increase the uptake of the technology and therefore make it more effective by reaching a larger critical mass of people. So that hasn't been in the case in Australia. Well, that's one of the reasons why the COVID Safe Tracing app hasn't been effective, that there hasn't been a high enough uptake. And law is often seen as lagging behind technology. But what I want to leave you with is the idea that law and technology are dependent on each other. The technology is socially embedded, and that law is one of the things that can regulate technology, as well as technology potentially being seen as a replacement for law, as something that's more effective than law. So just remembering that the International Telecommunications Union, which is the international organisation that is charged with international coordination on telecommunications, is found that only 2 out of 10 people in the developing world are online. And so that leaving everything to technology is not the solution. Instead, we need to use technology in the context of society. And we need to also try to include those who would otherwise be left behind in the digital divide.